Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MPAC Group PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before we begin, we would just like to submit the following poll, and if you give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I would now like to hand you over to the executive management team from MPAC Group PLC. Adam, good morning, sir.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Adam Holland. I'm Chief Executive of the MPAC Group, and over the course of the next 30 or 40 minutes, Will and I will tell you a little bit about MPAC. In fact, we'll go to the next slide, please, Will. We've got an agenda. We'll talk a bit about MPAC, the markets that we operate in. We will, of course, cover the impact of US tariffs and how we are responding to them. I'll hand over to Will, who will take you through the interim results for the first half. I'll take you through the 5 pillars of our strategy, tell you a bit about the progress that we're making there, and then we'll summarise, confirm the outlook, and of course, let me start with the end in mind. The outlook is that we're on track to meet the full year guidance that we issued back on the 1st of July. So let's get that out of the way at the outset. So that's what we're going to cover. Next chart, please, Will. Very good. Let's come on to the first substantive chart. I think is the next one. Okay, those of you that know MPAC well, with this chart will be familiar. For those that don't, let me introduce the MPAC Group. We design, build, install, and service the machines that millions of people around the world depend on. Our customers are FMCG producers. Half of our customer base operate in the food and beverage market. That's customers like Nestle, Mars, Diageo, PepsiCo, Mondelez, and so on. And about 25–30% of our customers operate in the healthcare sector. People like organisations like J&J, so Johnson & Johnson, Reckitt, Stryker, GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, and so on. If you don't know MPAC, you certainly know our customers. They are blue chip multinational companies, and they are household names. Today, we operate 6 businesses from 6 manufacturing facilities in North America, the UK, and Europe. And the capabilities that we provide to our customers, everything from raw food handling and hygienic conveying, machines that our customers use to assemble their products, anything from lasagna through to contact lenses, so a whole variety of different kinds of end products that our machines produce. We also make machines for the packaging, specifically secondary packaging machines. Those are the kinds of machines that might put, let's say, ice cream bars into the kind of carton that you'd stick in the freezer at home, but at very high speeds, 12 bars a second, those kinds of rates. So high-speed cartoning. We produce machines for putting cartons into larger corrugated cases and trays, case conveying through factories, through to the palletizing systems that take those cases and then stack them onto pallets for en-route distribution at the end of a factory line. Today, the group is made up of about 1,100 people, half of whom are engineers and designers, and our customers are right across the world, from Mexico to Malaysia. We support an installed base of about 6,500 machines worldwide, and so services are an important part of the way that we support our customers. Next chart, please, Will. We've often talked about the kind of 5-stage model, the way that we retain and win new customers, in fact. And that starts with consultation. It's a very small part of our revenue and profit in the group. So financially, perhaps not the thing to start with, but consultation is the way that we develop our customers' products and the packaging materials, the packaging design, and help to automate the way that our customers' processes operate. So it's a key part of winning new customers. Then we move into design, build, and installation, which is our original equipment business, and then monitoring and optimize the services businesses for the MPAC Group. Next chart, please. Now, the markets that we operate in are attractive, and they offer us very significant growth opportunities. They're attractive in 4 ways. Firstly, they are very large. Every year, more than $50 billion, or around $50 billion worth of packaging machinery equipment is bought somewhere in the world, and our market share of the addressable part of that market is about 2%. So we have a 98% market share to go for, a very significant growth opportunity there. The competition that we face is fragmented. Very large number of competitors. Some are much smaller than MPAC, might operate only in a niche machine type or perhaps within a single region in the world. Some are much larger, have the global reach that MPAC does, right up to companies of a few billion in revenue, operating right around the world and with a full line offering to customers. And we're able to compete and win business even with those very large competitors, because our customers often make the decisions based on the technical performance of a line that's being proposed. So it's the engineering capability of our teams to innovate and come up with creative ways to automate that make us successful in winning against those larger competitors. Every chief exec will tell you people are the key to their business, but in MPAC it is absolutely true. Next chart, please. So the investment proposition, if I think about MPAC from an investor perspective, there are 4 ways in which our group is an attractive investment proposition. First, we've covered the growth opportunity, the market share already. If I looked at quality of earnings, over the last 5 years, we've seen a 12% compound annual growth rate in services. Our operating margins in the first half of this year were up to 8.9%, up from 7.5% same time prior year. And if I looked at it in terms of capital employed, we talk about being a capital light business. Our return on capital employed was 14% in the first half of this year, up from 12% the prior year. And there's more still to go at in the second half of 2025. We've always excluded the pension, the UK defined pension scheme, from our calculation of a return on capital employed. But there was a very significant change in the first half of this year as we announced the buy-in to the UK defined benefit pension scheme. That announcement was back on the 1st of July, and Will is going to cover that again today. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the barrier to entry. It is the expertise of our people that is key to our customers. It's the insight that our people have into our customers' operations and the way that we do innovation, both on and off project, that makes us sticky with our customers. And that also creates a high barrier to entry to others trying to enter into our market space. So attractive in 4 ways: growth, quality of earnings, capital light, and barriers to entry. Next chart, please. Over many half-year results announcement, full-year results announcements now, we've presented a chart very similar to this one. And the update today, 90 original equipment orders won in the first half of this year with 41 different customers. By value, 42% of those original equipment orders were with customers that were new to the MPAC group. And that's been a very deliberate focus to help broaden our customer base over many successive half-year periods now. Of that 42%, 8.6 million, so about 13% of our original equipment orders in the first half, came from 4 global account customers who have the scale not just to place a single order with us in a period, but many orders over many successive years. And those are really important when you think about why this strategy is so important to us in terms of growing our business in the future. Now, I'd love to give you those 4 customer names and to talk in detail about specific projects, but non-disclosure agreements with our customers mean I can't give you specifics about future FMCG launches and the particular companies that we work with. What I will do is to give you some examples to give you colour. Of those 4 customers, one of them was a new win in the personal care sector. This is a global customer with more than 10 billion euros of revenue. Very, very pleased that our first project with them has been launched. It's a factory that we're building with them in Europe. Our machines will go into their factory in Europe. And it's taken many years to get the relationship to the point where we've started on that first project. And it's really exciting what it could lead to. And I'm going to describe what it could lead to by thinking of another new customer win, but this one from 2023. That was a customer that we won our first project in Singapore back in 2023. Right now, today, that line is being installed and commissioned in Singapore. And earlier this year, 2025, we secured a second project with that customer. This is for a new factory build in the UK. Why is it notable? Does it always take 2 years to go from that first win to a second win? What's really the ramp-up rate? Well, I think most importantly, we are bidding right now on 10 other projects with that very same customer for facilities in the US, Europe, and Asia. So it really shows why we start that process of winning and broadening our customer base. The final example I'm going to give from this chart is a customer who is a multinational global customer. We've done projects with them all over the world over many years. And earlier this year, we won a cartoning machine during a tender process for a new factory build in Mexico with that same customer. Why is it notable? Well, shortly after the tender was won for the cartoning machine, the next machine down the factory line is a case packing machine. It takes those cartons and puts them into corrugated cases. A few weeks after the award of the cartoning tender, we tendered and won the case packing machine. And following that, we went into a direct negotiation with the same customer for the palletizing system that sits downstream of the case packer, and successfully secured that contract as well. So we now have, for the first time, a Langen cartoner, a Langen case packer, and a CSI palletizer from the business that we acquired late last year going into the same factory in one of our customer bases. So notable, I think, for that reason. But the big story in the first half was all about US tariffs, and so we'll come on to that on the next chart, please, Will. Now, when tariffs were first announced earlier this year in the US, our immediate concern was about the impact on projects that were already up and running in our business, existing orders. And our concern was that customers might look at the increased cost as a result of those tariffs and look at cancellations. When we announced the impact of tariffs on the business earlier this year, we briefed that there had been no cancellations of existing orders as a result of tariffs. That was true on the 1st of July, and it is still true today. There's been no impact on existing orders, or indeed on our service business, which has also held up well. What has happened is that new capital expenditure decisions by our customers have been deferred, and the impact on us was that our order intake in the US was very significantly down in the first half of this year, as customers paused the launch of new projects rather than embarking on new investments. If I talk that through in numbers, at the 1st of January this year, our order book was £118 million. By the 1st of July, our order book had declined £27 million to 91 million. And if that trend had continued, we'd be in a very different position today. It has not continued. Roll on 2.5 months since the 1st of July. What have we seen? The order book today is £93 million. I'm going to call that broadly flat. I guess it's marginally up, but let's call it flat. That decline in the order book has stabilized now, but we've seen an impact on H2 revenue and cash, and that was the announcement that we made back on the 1st of July. What have we done about it? What can we control? Well, we've done quite a bit. The first thing we announced on the 1st of July was that we were going to consolidate our US businesses and close the Cleveland facility that we've operated. The last switchback machine has completed its factory acceptance test in Cleveland. We've moved a number of other in-flight projects of other switchback machines we're building for other customers to our other North American facilities. And as we continue to take switchback orders in the future, we'll build those in our other North American facilities, not in Cleveland. We've also moved the spare parts fulfillment center to Boston. So we now have a single hub in Boston supplying spare parts to all of our customers across the US. All of that's been completed over the last 10 weeks since the announcement, 1st of July. We've taken all the kind of normal cost and cash actions that you'd expect us to, removing contractors around the group, introducing discretionary spend restrictions, cutting back on capital investments and so on. But we also have opportunities with the acquisitions that we completed last year to go even further and even faster. So I'm delighted that in the first half of this year, we've completed the first electrical panel builds in Romania, supplying from what was previously just a CSI business, now supporting, in this particular example, a Lambert project built in our UK facility with sub-assemblies from Romania. Langen electrical panels are currently in manufacture in Romania to support our business in the Netherlands. And later this year, we'll see the first full Langen cartoner and Austro machine built in the Romania facility as well to support European customers of the Langen business. So really substantial progress there. And then if I look beyond the acquisitions, we've also announced the opening of a new engineering hub in Malaysia, providing global design engineering support to all of our facilities worldwide, taking advantage of the incredible capability of Malaysian engineers in KL and the cost base of the region. So some substantial changes. We've moved very, very fast to implement to address the market conditions that we see around us. And I must stress the acquisitions have really helped to make us a much more resilient group. It's given us levers that we can pull in response to what we see around us today. And with that said, let's go on to the next chart and talk a little bit more about CSI specifically. Now, if I go back to pre-acquisition MPAC world, 50% of our order intake in a typical year came from the US. And if you look at the pie chart in the bottom right of this corner, in the first half of this year, that number has now declined from 50% to 10% in the first half of the year. By contrast, the CSI business is particularly strong with customers in EMEA, Central and South America, and those regions have been performing well. So at the half year, if you look at the pie chart top right, CSI now represents just over half of the group order book, 51% of the order book. The acquisition, the impact of the acquisition on the group is very significant. You can see that from the data, and it's been made possible by our shareholders last year. So thank you very much for your support to make that happen. The CSI team have done an outstanding job strategically as well. In the bottom left-hand corner of the chart, you can see a series of stacked bars that show the progression in the concentration of customer orders for CSI over several years. If you go back to 2023, before the acquisition, customer one, their largest customer, made up 64% of CSI's original equipment orders that year. All other customers together made up 36%. And that level of customer concentration was seen by the team as a strategic imperative to address. The team went out to broaden their customer base, and within a year moved that 36% up to 77% of orders from all other customers. Substantial movement from 2023 to 2024. How have they done in the first half of this year? Well, that trend has continued. So up from 77% to 95% in the first half of this year, as the team continues to win orders from a much wider range of customers. That's important for the CSI performance. It's important for customer one as well. I must stress this. No customer wants to know that a supplier is dependent on them, and it's really important that our engineers are engaged on interesting and challenging projects. And so introducing other customers to our customer base is always seen positively by existing customers. I must also say, although the chart is a stacked bar, if we looked at it in absolute value, the trend would be positive too. So we're not trying to sort of hide away a deterioration in absolute value, quite the opposite. Next chart, please. Okay, turning away from numbers, I'd like to talk a bit about the Horizon machine. It's a machine that we announced the launch from our innovation team in previous presentations. And innovation, the reason I stress it is that it's often the way that we win new customers. To the extent that we can find solutions to customer problems in a way that's better than our competitors, it always gives us an advantage to win business with new customers away from incumbents. We do that both on project, in that example, and off project as we develop new innovative projects and new innovative products. So I'm absolutely delighted to be able to announce that the Horizon machine has been awarded a Red Dot award and won. You might know Red Dot. Red Dot is a global award. It's very prestigious in the world of industrial design. The MPAC Group have never won a Red Dot award before. Previous winners include companies like Apple, Ferrari, Google, Sony, and so you add MPAC to the list and we're in very good company there. Why did the judges select MPAC for a Red Dot award this year? Well, they particularly liked the new Affinity operator interface that we provided on the Horizon machine. It brings a kind of iPhone level ease of use to operators of that machine. And if you've ever worked in a factory and come to a new machine and try to operate it, you'll know that operations are often very complex to get the high performance and efficiency out of a production line. It takes a lot of experience and training to get there. And the Affinity interface takes a lot of that experience requirement away and makes it much, much easier for a less experienced operator to quickly come up to speed and get the best out of a production line. The judges also like the sustainability credentials of the machine. We've designed it to be pneumatic free. It has a much better energy consumption than any machine we've produced in the MPAC range before. And I'm really excited about the award. I'm even more excited about the opportunity to now take those kinds of features and read them across the whole of the MPAC range, not just in the Langen range, but right across the group. So well done to the MPAC Innovations team. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Will to take you through the half-year numbers.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So I'll start with the financial highlights to the first half, and I think it's apparent it's been a challenging commercial environment in the US, but with some real positives around gross margin and operating margins. But if I start with order intake, so we're reporting order intake of 64.2 million, which is 7.5% above the prior half year. And that's underpinned by a very strong performance from the CSI business that we acquired last year. On a like-for-like basis, we're showing order intake 37% below the prior half year, which demonstrates the extent of tariff disruption on customer decision-making in the US and the importance of completing the acquisition at the back end of last year, as we did. I think it's probably be helpful, Adam's already given some context, but to consider the US market that was our largest market pre-acquisitions. In the first half of this year, original equipment order intake from the US was less than 5 million. So it shows the extent of disruption that we've been faced with in the first half. That said, we made really good progress on customer diversification. Adam's mentioned that 42% of orders won from new customers, and that's helped to mitigate the impact. And regionally, it's probably no surprise now that EMEA is by far our largest market. If I move on to order book and revenue, I'll start with revenue, up 41% to 84.7 million. On a like-for-like basis, if we take away the acquisitions and one particular onerous contract in the clean energy sector, the like-for-like revenue is broadly flat against the prior year. And by sector, food and beverage now by far our largest sector, with 44, almost 45 million of our revenue coming from the food and beverage sector. Healthcare is our second largest at 22.5 million. And then we sweep up in others, all other consumer products. I think in terms of other graphs on here, looking at the order book, 91.7 million at the half year, that's down significantly, reflecting the lower order intake in the US especially. But that order book gives us good coverage against forecast half to revenue for 2025. And indeed, we consider revenue profile on a rolling 12-month basis. And that order book at the end of June gives us approximately 60% of revenue cover for the 12 months to the end of the first half 2026. And historically, 60% of future 12-month revenue cover is a healthy position for MPAC to be. So yeah, whilst we've upgraded or downgraded, guidance for the full year 2025, we're now left with a high degree of revenue cover to achieve the full year guidance. And we want to talk about margins and profitability. And as I mentioned earlier, that's really one of the highlights for the first half. We've shown very strong gross margin development, up nearly 8 percentage points to 36%. So what's the driver to that improvement? Well, the first and most significant contributor to that improvement is the margin performance from the CSI business we acquired last year. They performed really well, high degree of loading and utilization, and they've been very successful in utilizing the low-cost manufacturing and assembly capacity that they have in Romania. Alongside that, our service business margins have been strong, and the comparator included the dilution effect of one large project within the clean energy sector. So those three factors are the main drivers to the good margin development over the previous half year. And as you would expect, that strong margin and the revenue growth is dropping through to an increase in underlying operating profit to 7.5 million compared to 4.5 million in the previous half year. So it's up 67%. In terms of EPS, that equates to an EPS of 12.1p, and that's after the impact of the issue of nearly 10 million shares last year to fund the CSI and BCA acquisitions. In terms of working capital and balance sheet related items, so net debt at the half year is 43.3 million. And that includes vendor loans and deferred consideration, which was associated with the CSI acquisition. Working capital, we've shown an increase from 0.4 to 6.9 million. There's a slide on the balance sheet in a couple of slides' time, but fundamentally that comes down to missing deposits from the lower order book. We'll move on to the next slide, which shows a bridge of profit before underlying PBT from the first half of last year to first half of this year. So from 4 million to 5 million. Main contributing factors on the left-hand side, okay, on a like-for-like basis, revenues increases contributed another 7 million of underlying PBT, and the increase in margin that we referred to, a very positive 6.6 million coming from the higher gross margin percentage. Offsetting that, there's the administrative and SG&A costs of the two acquired businesses and additional debt financing costs associated with the borrowings. That brings it down to 5 million for the full year. On the right-hand side, I think it's worth commenting on the split of OE and service revenue. So we see a very strong performance from original equipment revenue the first half. And as I said, that's underpinned by a strong performance from CSI. And then in relation to non-underlying items, the table on the right-hand side, it's probably worth just running through those positions because there's some large items in there. So the first non-cash item was an 8.5 million impairment of the goodwill of the 2020 acquisition of Switchback. In relation to site consolidation in the US, there was the impairment of the lease and some leasehold improvements, which was another 3 million non-cash items, and then amortization of acquired intangibles, 3 million as well. So that's associated with the CSI, BCA and Lambert acquisitions. And the final items relate to pension related positions. In terms of the balance sheet, I won't go through every position on here, but I'll talk about the main movements compared to the closing position at the end of 2024. Starting with non-current assets, the most significant change there is in respect of our UK pension scheme. So the accounting on a buy-in basis means we've seen a 30 million reduction in the non-current asset to the previous IAS 19 valuation. Alongside that, there is the write-down of the goodwill associated with the previous acquisition of Switchback. Inventories and trade receivables, fairly steady, not a huge amount of change there. The only other position with a significant change is trade and other payables. And within trade and other payables, there's the position associated with customer deposits. So the lower order book at the half year is reflected here in lower customer deposits. Then the next slide, it shows a cash bridge. So this is the opening gross cash of 18.2 million at the start of the year to the closing gross cash of 8.6 million and the waterfall between those two. So EBITDA we've spoken about, that contributed 9.7 million of cash. That's offset by the 6.5 million of additional working capital and 3.2 million of repayment of borrowings. The ongoing pension contributions commitment is shown as 1.4 million. Albeit it's worth saying that contribution has almost entirely gone to escrow, and I'll pick up the impact of that on the following slide where we talk about the status of the pension scheme. And then alongside that, some capital additions and lease payments. The other large block in the pillar, tax, FX, interest and non-underlying items. The largest positions in there are interest, some tax, and then there is the costs from the 2024 acquisitions of CSI and BCA that have fallen through from a cash flow perspective into 2025. Also worth saying at this stage, we've got a committed facility with HSBC through until 2027. The company continues to trade with significant headroom above the covenants associated with that facility. And we have a very supportive relationship with HSBC. The last slide I'll go through is the status of the pension scheme, and I'll probably take a step back. Many may know that the history of the scheme. It's mainly associated with members and deferred members from what was the Molins PLC days of the group. The scheme closed a long time ago. It's a large scheme relative to the size of the company. At one point, liabilities were close to 500 million, and we were running with a deficit of around 60, 70 million. But we've worked hard over various triennial valuations. We've brought that back down to a surplus now. And in July 2025, we were able to announce that we reached an agreement with Aviva, who purchased a bulk annuity for 249 million, covering known future liabilities associated with the scheme. So that was the point we achieved to buy in. The timeline here on in is conservatively estimated to be 2 years to go from buy-in to buyout, in which time we'll work with Aviva and the trustees and administrators of the scheme to make sure we've got transparency on data that we're handing over to Aviva. And yeah, the goal remains to complete buyout and wind up as swiftly as possible with as minimal professional fees as possible. And we anticipating, we announced in July that we would expect the value of the escrow account where we'd be making contributions to be returned to the company at the point we reach buyout. So that's estimated at 5 million. So we're working to bring that timeline in as efficiently as possible and achieve that buyout. At which point we will turn the focus to the smaller US schemes, around 8 million in liabilities of those schemes and mature schemes. And we'll work to do a similar exercise with them. It's a real success for the company. It de-risks what was a very large scheme to us, and it will crystallize any future contributions that we need to make once we achieve buyout. And with that, I'll hand back over to Adam.
Thank you, Will. Over the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to touch on the 5 pillars of our group strategy, which have been stable now for quite some time. And those 5 themes are going for growth, outstanding customer service, innovation, people, and operational excellence. I won't go through every point on the chart here, but just pick out some highlights. Under going for growth, I think probably the place to start, we think about our sales pipeline as a pipe. And in at the top of the pipe, what we see coming in are new projects that our customers are thinking about launching in the future, prospective new projects. The value of new prospective projects going into the pipeline has been higher this year in the first half than previous years. It varies around the group from business to business and region to region, but the lowest increase has been 2% and the largest 14% year on year on a like-for-like basis. So, put simply, we're seeing more ideas going into the pipeline of new projects than ever before. The pipe is not leaking, so we're not seeing projects that have been conceived of being shelved forever. What we're seeing is customers saying, we're going to push back the launch of that until next month, next quarter, next year. We're going to delay the launch. We're going to pause on the launch. So there's nothing leaking out the sides of our pipe, but it's as if there is a cork in the bottom of the pipe, in the US particularly, where customers are not then following through to actually place purchase orders with suppliers and launch those new capital investment projects. If you imagine a pipe with a cork in the bottom, it's not leaking, and that you continue to fill it at an increasing rate, what's going to happen is the pipe is going to bulge, and at some point something has to give. We don't know when. I'm not going to give you a kind of crystal ball gazing view today on when that will change, but something has to give. And we've seen that kind of cycle before. If you go back to 2008-9, the financial crisis, the impact of COVID on capital markets around the world, we've seen these kinds of behaviours before. So we know what is likely to happen in the future. Second thing I'll highlight on the customer service, again, is a sort of seed of things to come. Is the progress that we've made with digital and vision. In the first half of this year, we've secured 9 orders in the digital services space. That's quite a small number if you think about the 6,500 machines that we have installed around the world today. But it's definitely a sign of things to come, and I'm really excited about the progress the team have made there with 9 customers placing their commitment in us in the digital space in H1. Under innovation, we've already talked quite a bit about Horizon. Last year, we also launched a new machine, the Ostro machine. Just to update you on that, we've now secured more than £3 million of orders for the Ostro machine, and that's continuing to rise. It's going very well. And earlier this year, we announced the launch of the Brisa cartoning machine and the Maestro XL, 2 machines specifically designed around the pizza market. And the reason we've done that, earlier it was probably best exemplified earlier this month. I visited a pizza producer who we've been building a relationship with for 4 or 5 years now. The facility, they operate a number of facilities, but the particular one I visited earlier this month produces about 1 million pizzas every single day, so high volume from that particular facility. And it's the Brisa that's really piqued their interest. They're considering a new line in the future to expand their capacity, and the Brisa can meet the customer's needs in a way that nothing else on the market can. So it really shows the power of innovation to open a door to a new customer. These things take time. Under operational excellence, I'm really pleased with the progress the team have made. Will talked about the improvement in gross margin percentage, return on sales. I'm delighted with the progress in Romania around panel building and the Austria launch. Very good work from the team. There's more still to come. Next chart, please, Will, and we'll talk a bit about people. Also today, as well as the half-year results, we announced a number of board changes. And I'd like to take this moment to thank Sarah Fowler and Doug Robertson for their support of MPAC Group over many, many years as non-exec directors. We've been working for quite some time now on succession planning, and today we're announcing the expansion of our board with 3 new appointments. I'm absolutely delighted to say that Simon Kesterton joins us as a non-exec director and chair of the audit committee. Simon is currently CFO at Kia PLC. David Squires joins us as non-exec director. David is currently chief executive of Senior PLC, and Clive Wiley joins us as non-exec director. Clive is currently the chair of Mothercare PLC, senior independent director at Griffin Mining, and until July was the chair of De La Rue PLC as well. All 3 appointments bring very significant experience and breadth to the MPAC Group, and the appointments position MPAC with a really, really strong board now. I'm delighted to welcome Simon, David, and Clive to the team. Next chart, please. And next chart again. So we're almost drawing to a close. In a minute, we'll turn over to Q&A. If you have questions that you still like to answer, please enter them into the chat function, and we'll pick those up. There are really 3 things I'm going to highlight off this chart, 3 key takeaways from first half. The first thing is the acquired businesses are performing really well. The second thing is that the team have responded incredibly well and at great pace to some very challenging market conditions arising from US tariffs. And they've made strategic changes that position MPAC well for the future as markets recover, and they will recover. And the third thing is the decline in the order book that we saw from the 1st of January through to the 1st of July has flattened out over the 2.5 months since then. So 118, 91, now 93, in line with our expectations. And as a result, we can say that the group is on track to meet the full year guidance that we issued on the 1st of July. And with that, I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have come through. So the first question that has come through is, what barriers to entry does MPAC enjoy, and are these barriers increasing or being eroded? So this harks back to the kind of one of the early charts in the pack, where we talked about the barriers to entry that we enjoy. The key here is our people, okay? Our people have real depth of experience to be able to give insight to our customers in the ways to automate their processes and the ways that machines can be adapted and developed to meet a particular production line needs. So that's an overlap of two kind of circles on the Venn diagram. That's deep understanding of machine automation and a really strong relationship with customers. And that's really important when you think about the changes we made last year, bringing together the CSI, BCA, Saiga Vision businesses with the rest of the group, the pre-acquisition group. That gives us an enormous opportunity now to cross-sell between the businesses to customers that each of the group companies know very well. And the best example I can give you to answer that question is a popcorn factory that I visited last year. I went because we'd sold, I think it was 12 cartoning machines over many years to this popcorn factory. The factory actually produces more than 1 billion bags of microwave popcorn every year. So it's a very significant operation, almost lights off, almost nobody on the factory floor. And we'd heard that they were looking to expand production. So I visited with the sales team. I was keen to get to know the customer a bit better. And our interest was Lang & Partners. When we got there, what we found was that the Langen cartling machines that we'd already provided were actually not being used to their maximum capacity. It was absolutely possible for us to increase the rating of those existing machines and produce more popcorn bags from the same Langen cartlers. So, was it a wasted visit? No. The reason the cartlers were not being stressed to their maximum limit was that further downstream in the factory, the palletizing machines were the bottleneck for that production facility. They simply couldn't load cases onto pallets fast enough to keep the rest of the factory fully utilized. And so the customer was thinking about changing the palletizing machines. It was a great moment because we could describe to that customer the acquisition of the CSI business, the range of palletizing machines and case conveying systems that CSI offered. And all of a sudden we had an opportunity for a CSI sale that had come from a Langen sales visit. So a real cross-sell in action. We almost got back in the car and headed back up the road to the airport to fly on to the next city. When the factory owner or factory manager just remarked, that would make a big difference to us. And then the only remaining people on the shop floor will be those doing the quality inspection of popcorn kernels. So what do you mean? Well, we have a large number of people who on any given day spend the whole shift simply watching the line to see popcorn kernels and pick out bad quality popcorn before it goes into the bag. We do it manually, visual inspection. And we were able to describe the Vision team. We explained that we were doing a project, a very similar project for an onion ring producer, not very many miles away from that popcorn factory. And we were using AI to help train the machine to detect what a bad onion ring looks like compared with a good onion ring. We suggested, why don't we take the same machine and adapt it to look for bad popcorn kernels instead? So it's the best example I can think of how that kind of customer intimacy and deep insight into how machines can support a customer's operations really creates those barriers and gives us an advantage in the market. Okay, the next question we'll pick up is, do your prospective US customers for UK manufacturing machines expect you to share the additional cost of tariffs, or do you insist that they shoulder the whole burden? Okay, well, I'm going to answer the question in two ways. I'll answer the question as written, and then I'm going to also give you a different way of thinking about the same question. The question as written, the answer is that we're always in competition to win business. There are very few companies in the world who can do what we do, but almost in every case, in the final round of tendering for a project, we find we're up against 2 or 3 other competitors to win the project, and it's a different competitor list on different projects, but they're always very capable. So it's a competitive position, and therefore we're not in a place where we can just simply pass tariffs on and so on. But our customers do absolutely understand the impact of tariffs. They can see the headlines the same as we can. What's the solution there? Well, in many cases, what we've offered to US customers who are concerned about tariffs on UK exports to the US, imports into the US, we've offered to complete the build in our Boston facility. Absolutely no problem for us to design and build it. Design in our UK facility and build in our Boston facility. That addresses the problem to some extent. Of course, our Boston facility is still exposed to tariffs on steel that's brought into the US for machining in the US. So it doesn't entirely eliminate the problem, but it changes the nature of it. And those tariffs are changing day by day. So it's quite a complex answer to a very straightforward question. I'm going to answer it a different way. I actually don't think it matters. If I think about what's happening in the US, it's not that our US customers are placing orders at an increasing rate with US companies or UK companies, or in fact companies in any other country. We're simply not seeing US customers come to a point of decision on launching new projects at all. And so, it's not really a case of saying what the impact of tariffs are on who wins the order. Customers are delaying those capital investments until a future period. So that's the reason why we've seen a decline in our order book in the first half. It's not a loss of market share. It's a change in the way that the market has been performing. And I believe it's a pause. I don't believe that investment in FMCG goods in the US is finished. I think that demand is still there. It's a pause. It will unblock at some point. and when is a question for another day. Okay. I'm going to have a question here for Will. We've got a question here. How long is a typical sales cycle?
Okay, so obviously different for our recurring service business to our original equipment business, but let's stick with original equipment. So typically, let's take it pre-sale. From the point we first have a request for a quotation or inquiry through to when we typically would take a purchase order, it can be up to 9 months of consultation and working with the customer to absolutely define what they're looking for. From the point we receive a PO through till getting factory acceptance, sign off on the equipment, meeting performance criteria, there's quite a lot of variability there, but we see typically between 9 and 18 months, depending on the size and complexity of the project. So really not uncommon for projects to be within our order book, albeit reducing in value, for up to 18 months from the period from when we take the purchase order.
Very good. Okay, the next one is phrased as an observation rather than a question, but I think it's excellent, so I'm going to read it out. Part of the reason for tariffs is to encourage more manufacturing in the USA, so surely that will mean greater demand for your products in the US. Also, in the US, the crackdown on immigration will surely lead to an increasing need for automation, as there are less people available to do manual jobs. Another positive view. I think it's a really good insight and absolutely correct. We have seen some US FMCG producers already shift production into the US from imports from other countries. Taking really proactive steps in exactly the way that I think the US administration intended the tariffs to stimulate growth in domestic production in the US. And the reason we know this is that customer had asked us to automate their new factory builds in the US for them. Of course, US labor tends to be more expensive than labor from some of the lower cost regions that US imports have come from. And so, that same factory in the US needs to be even more highly automated than the same factory in a low cost economy elsewhere. So increased demand for the kinds of things that we do. And you're absolutely right as well to point out that overall, the demand for automation comes as a result of increasing cost pressure on producers, and looking at how to reduce labor costs is one of the things that automation does very well. So there are lots of positive drivers there that we believe in the long run will be very, very good for MPAC and for companies like MPAC, particularly those that already have a manufacturing footprint in the US to support US companies, US customers, and we do in Boston. So, I think there are some really good long-term trends there, long-term drivers, but in the very short term, in the immediate here and now, what we're seeing is a slowdown in customer decision making. We have to get through that pause and into those kind of long-term drivers, and then the point is exactly right. Okay, a question here for Will. For large capital orders, what is your margin profile compared to smaller orders or recurring service business? Are there risks in large projects from overruns, warranty, and performance guarantees?
Okay, so larger order, probably the answer is it's not dependent on the size of the order. The risk profile, and therefore the margin risk profile, is more closely aligned to the complexity and the number of engineering hours associated with it. So where we see a different dynamic in terms of risk and margin profile, if there's a heavy body of engineering, that inherently has some more risk in the project. Quite often what we see is project number one, we're proving the process and proving the principle with the customer, and then there's repeat lines that follow. And you would expect the repeat lines typically come with a higher margin than the first line because the main body of engineering is associated with the first PO. So I'll answer the question slightly differently. Where there's repeat orders related to the previous order where we've proven the principle and completed the engineering, we see a better margin profile there. So it's not only aligned with value. And the other part of the answer is tied into the question regarding the recurring service business margins compared to original equipment. Yes, we absolutely do generate a better margin on service business. I won't go through the exact values because for commercial sensitivities, but the margin profile will improve for the group as we grow and develop our service business.
Very good. Will, any comment on overruns, warranty, performance guarantees that you want to make?
Okay, I'll touch on that. So we offer a warranty. We'll start with that on pretty much every project. Again, it's part of the commercial negotiation. We don't typically have a profile where we have projects in the field that are distressed and carry a high value of warranty costs. So our reputation is good in the market, and we are completing projects for either factory or site acceptance testing that aligns with the contractual commitments. And all other aspects are part of a commercial negotiation that we go into on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you, Will. So the next question is around R&D. The question is, do you spend your own money or do customers pay for it? And the answer is both. The examples I gave earlier of the Horizon machine, the Ostro development, the Brisa, those were all new products that we invested our own R&D money into, capital investments in prior quarters, and then we launched those new products for customers. But that's not the only way in which we do innovation. We do a lot of innovation on each particular project. Almost every project we do carries some form of development in it. The core of a cartoning machine, the way you erect and push products into a carton or load from the top is often standard. But the product that we're loading into that carton varies. And if we're handling a razor blade cartridge or a contact lens blister pack or a confectionery item, whatever it might be, the way that we manage the infeed of those products into our cartoning machine varies significantly. And it's the ability of our teams to take that kind of chaotic infeed of product coming down the line at us, often at very, very high speed. Our pizza machines are running at 150, 180 pizzas a minute, and we consider that a mid-range, mid-speed machine. 3 pizzas a second is mid-speed for us. And the spacing of those pizzas and the positioning on the conveyor belt is never absolutely perfect. So the ability to kind of take that chaos and turn it into something that we can then carton at that speed of 3 or 4 a second, that takes real ingenuity. And a lot of that innovation is done on a project. And we do, as you saw, 90 project wins in the first half of this year. So it's not something that we see as sort of an unusual risk to take on. It's something our teams are very, very well practiced at and get better and better at doing it. So there's a real skill in being able to innovate on a project. And our team are very good at being able to judge the risk in that, what needs to be done on project and what is done off project. So the answer to your question is both. We often spend our own money, but our customers also invest in innovation for particular applications that they might need. I think the next question is for Will. The question is, given global trade uncertainty, how are you balancing exposure across geographies to mitigate reliance on the Americas?
Well, I think the first half of the year has probably demonstrated the outcome or the measures that have been implemented. Take a step back, the acquisition of CSI was strategic in many ways, but part of that, the key value that it brought to the group was it gave us a additional exposure to the EMEA market, whereas previously we had a higher percentage of orders coming from customers in the US market. So there's a natural rebalance from the acquisition of CSI in terms of geographical exposure. The US market has been tough in the first half, but the Americas overall is still trading. So Canada and LATAM is still trading in line with expectations, and the order intake that we are reporting from the Americas is weighted towards those 2 other jurisdictions as opposed to the US. And we are focusing our efforts and our sales teams and our capital in maximizing the opportunities from those other markets and from EMEA.
Very good. Thank you, Will. So the next question is, how much customization of MPAC's equipment is required for each order? I think we probably both have a go at this one. I'll describe in qualitative ways, and then you can think about how we'd quantify how much. I'm going to give a couple of examples. I think we've talked quite a lot about cartoning and case packing, but that's not everything that we do in the group. If I think about the BCA business that we acquired in Boston last year, that business produced a machine for a meal line that makes lasagna, and literally makes lasagna. So the machine that the BCA team have designed, built, installed, commissioned, and is now running, and we're servicing and supporting in the field today, takes sheets of pasta and layers those sheets of pasta into a tray as part of building up a lasagna, that can then be taken home and baked for home use. So a lasagna assembly machine. I mean, there's an incredible amount of customization that goes into designing and building a machine like that. I don't think the world had ever seen one like the machine that BCA put together. But does that mean we started from a blank sheet and everything was invented? No. What the team have done is to take building blocks that we understand very well and put them together in a very novel way in order to do that job for that customer. And that same theme actually carries across to many of the projects that CSI do in designing a palletizing system. The system for taking a corrugated case and moving it around the factory and stacking it onto pallets. That takes fairly standard building blocks of how you convey a case and how you divert channels, how you manage the data flows to track exactly where a particular case is in that conveying system. How you then plan the balancing of loading of particular palletizing machines at the end of a line. And some of these can be a single robotic cell or a really complicated inline palletizing system that's running at many very, very high rates. Let's leave it at that, rather than giving specific numbers. That takes some fairly standard building blocks and configures them in a completely unique way for that customer and their particular facility and their particular product need. So that's an enormous amount of customization, but of standard building blocks. So it's quite hard to give you a kind of qualitative answer in a sound bite that answers the question. What I will say is it's very unusual for us to see a project with almost zero engineering hours where we're just building something that's exactly the same as the line before. It does happen, but it's very rare. And it's very, very rare for us to find a project that's so innovative. We're spending hundreds of thousands of engineering hours. Will, can you help us with a kind of way of quantifying that perhaps for the question?
Sure. So whilst there's never one typical project, but if you looked at all of MPAC's OE projects, we see typically a 60-40 split between costs associated with labour and costs associated with parts materials. So 40% being cost of our people. That's split between engineers, project management, assembly. That gives a context for the overall project. About 40% of our cost of sales is relating to people. Now that's not all associated with customization, but it's the engineering element, which is where there's always something new on a project.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you. I think we'll mark that as our final question. We're just coming up to the hour now. So thank you to all those that have posted Q&A. If anyone had a question that we haven't answered, we will do our best to pick those up.
Perfect. Adam, Will, if I may just jump back in there, and thank you for your presentation and for being so generous of your time and addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this morning. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you after the presentation. But Adam, perhaps before really now just looking to redirect those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn back to the kind of outlook comments. Three things to take away. The acquired businesses are performing really, really well. I think the team have responded well and at pace to some very challenging market conditions, positioning us much better for the future as markets recover, and they will. And the last piece is that the decline in the order book that we've reported back in July has now flattened out in the 2.5 months since, and as a result, the group is on track to meet full year guidance. Thank you very much for your time today.
Perfect, Adam. That's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of MPAC Group PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.